Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here. A slightly different approach to the stars unraveled today. I have been approached by the lovely Rita and Militia of Vanadian Avenue to do an astrological episode about the music of 2023. Now, I say that, offering that with the caveat that I am not a mundane astrologer. I don't specialize in making forecast about events in the real world. I'm far too entrenched in the psychological, spiritual world for that. However, I will give it a go with a spirit of fun. So please take everything I'm saying with a pinch of salt, a dash of salsa, and a soupçon of silliness, and I'm sure we will get along just fine. So the connection between astrology and music is a very venerable and time-worn one. In the ancient Greek schools of Orpheus and Plato, they had this concept of the music of the spheres, this idea that the interlocking orbits and mechanisms of all the planets in the solar system, the classical solar system that is, from the Sun to Saturn, all influenced and interacted with one another, much like music. You know, in music, we take individual notes and we pit them against one another to create harmonies and discords. And some notes work very nicely together, others create tension. And the interactions between the different planets to one another also work very much in the same way. You know, you could say that the trine between two planets is like a harmonious triad, a major or minor chord in a popular work. A square is more like a piece of passing tension, the square between two planets, that adds an extra piece of drama and momentum and spiciness to music, whereas, say, an opposition or a quincunx is like a discord, a nasty, jagged notes that shouldn't go together and which create an element of unease and strangeness, and which is better for expressing the nastier, grittier, tougher, stranger side of the human emotional spectrum. Now, because the planets influence our moods and feelings, they will also influence the type of music that we are attracted to or which might find distasteful. You know, when we're in a given mood, most of the time, if we're enjoying that mood or want to carry on inhabiting that space, or we want to put ourselves into a certain mood, we will choose a piece of music that will reinforce the melodies and harmonies that we feel inside our soul. You know, if you're feeling happy and bouncy, you're going to want to have something funky and groovy to keep you in that space. Whereas actually, if you're kind of nursing and indulging a bit of a depression, then you're going to find music that draws out and douses for the tragedy that lurks within your soul. You know, there's a tragedy lurking in my soul right here. And so different planets naturally pull us towards different pleasures. Now, when looking at forecasts for long-term trends, we look at Neptune, because Neptune rules collective dreams, collective fantasies, collective delusions. What is fashion? What is taste, or the taste of a given epoch, but a shared fantasy, a shared willingness to say, yes, we all invest in this personal dream. And so looking at where Neptune is in terms of the signs and its aspect to other planets can reveal a bit about this. For instance, for the last decade or so, Neptune has been going for its own house of Pisces, which again likes things that are melancholic, likes things that are tragic. And I think that's why so much of the popular music you hear is very much approaching things from this strong emotional angle. You know, it likes to have these big soaring melodies with emotional cadenzas that talk about heartbreak and all the tragedy of the human experience, and why in the cinema we have all this obsession with Marvel and superhero movies, you know, these things that are trying to re-enchant the world and bring back magic into it. But in terms of just looking at the tenor and flavor of a specific year, we have to go to Jupiter, because the ancient Chinese astrologers referred to Jupiter as the year star, and this is because it spends approximately 1 year transiting every zodiac sign. And that means that for every year that passes, Jupiter is kind of the thing that gives that year its own special quality, its own special vibe. And last year, for most of last year, Jupiter was in Pisces, and I think that's why some of the big hitters that we had in the music industry were those which revolved around exploring emotional, deep emotions. I think of Taylor Swift and her Midnights album, which conjures up this dreamy, nostalgic soundscape, but which also goes deep, very psychologically deep, into all the complex emotions and fantasies and nostalgia and obsessions and plotting and masterminding that underlie relationships. Neptune and Pisces, it loves those complex, messy emotions that so much of the time people try and turn off from, but when we're in that Neptunian vibe, we just want to dive right in and get jiggy with all those nasty emotions. Of course, that all begs the question of what, pray tell, is Jupiter doing in 2023? Well, like I said, having been in Pisces, it ingressed back into Aries in December after being retrograde, and will be in Aries until about mid-May. Now, the musical vibe of Aries is very different to Pisces. Aries in general, like most fire signs, isn't very fond of emotions, or at least any part of the emotional spectrum which makes us feel weak and vulnerable. Aries wants to feel strong, heroic, assertive, capable, flamboyant, great, magnificent, charming, winsome, capable of taking on life. It wants music that is upbeat and which reinforces its egotism in a positive way, that makes it feel like it can step out the house, take charge of its life, and go forth and get what it wants, and win over the favor of everyone it meets. And so it's going to need music that reinforces that. So anything that's dancey, that's up tempo, which is upbeat, which is very positive and optimistic, or humorous, that's the kind of vibe that Jupiter in Aries is going to want. And that also includes the more aggressive side of the emotional spectrum. It wants music that makes it feel tough, driven, and full of stamina and energy, and capable of running to the top of that hill. Kate Bush. So I think that, as well as being funky and groovy, R&B, dancey type music, I think rock music and metal and anything that is generally has a quicker tempo is really going to fit nicely with the vibes of that planet. However, that might be slightly complicated further into Jupiter's transit once it starts being conjunct Chiron, which is the centaur planetoid, which governs traumas and our inner wounds and the wisdom that we've derived from those wounds. So, music perhaps that explores identity crises, that explores mental health problems, that explores the struggles that and suffering we've had to undergo in order to become more ourselves. That's more the kind of musical journey that Chiron will want, which will very much be increased later on in the transit, closer towards the end, when Jupiter is squaring Pluto, and again bringing up that hero fighting against the dark dragon type vibe. Now, additionally, Jupiter in Aries is also competitive. It likes being able to pit its energies against someone else to reinforce its own sense of strength and power. And therefore, music which revolves around an element of competitive showmanship, I think, will also flourish in this transit. I often think of jazz in particular, which is spontaneous. Fire signs like spontaneous music. It revolves around improvisation, but also especially in the more improvisatory bebop spheres of jazz. You have different soloists all trying to be better than one another. So I think any music that enables the performer to really show off and just kind of dazzle and outdo someone else is what will flourish there. Now, unusually for Jupiter will also be going into Taurus after mid-May for the rest of the year, which again has a very different vibe. Whereas Aries loves everything that's new and novel and surprising and exciting and stimulating, Taurus generally prefers what it knows. So, I mean, that's a good time for classic bands to make revivals, and maybe for cover bands who are benefiting off of that. But the conservative taste of Taurus means that people want something that sounds familiar, that feels comfortable. But it also has that great Venusian regard for beauty, for things which are. It doesn't want things that are showy and flamboyant, as with Aries. It prefers things which are more carefully put together, which have a sense of form and structure, where there is wonderful virtuosity, but it's not showy virtuosity. It's virtuosity that has a sleekness to it, a shimmer to it. Yeah. But even if Jupiter in Taurus has that more conservative, restrained, respectable, but as very aesthetic taste, Jupiter will be spending much of its transit through Taurus between July and October, in conjunction with Uranus, who prefers surprises, who likes things that are a bit more radical and experimental. So already, I think that reinforces the possibility of some classic bands getting back together unexpectedly, and some classic bands also suddenly breaking up. But I think there's also a much greater possibility of fusion. I think Taurus likes things that are retro, that reminds it of its past, and therefore I think there might be a bit of a vogue for taking musical styles from the past and fusing them with current elements. So, maybe exploring some of those more retro vibes, and finding ways of making them fresh and sexy and sassy and modern and chic. Now, also for that transit, as Jupiter rules long distance travel and Uranus rules, again, surprises, the unexpected, of radical revolutions, I think for some bands that could represent a time when they have an opportunity to tour to places they've never been before, to open up entirely new fan bases, and specifically if they are experimenting and allowing themselves to try new sounds and new fusions and styles, that might also open them up to bigger audiences by extension. However, Jupiter during Uranus often means that touring during those 3 months also might be fraught with lots of technical difficulties. There might be lots of unexpected, strange things that happen during that period. So generally, I'd say for that period, be very careful with your equipment. Make sure you have it all checked and looked over regularly. Be very careful whilst traveling on the road, really check things out, but also be flexible, be open to sudden cancellations in your schedule, perhaps leading to leaving space for new opportunities that could be wonderful for you. I very much hope they will be. And the same will be also said about touring when Mercury is retrograde, which it is currently now until January 19th. So again, during Mercury retrogrades, that is time when people's equipment is likely to suddenly go bust, or suddenly need changing, or where your car might break down to or from a gig. So those periods, again, I would say be extra careful and attentive during. Anyway, that's everything for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and that you will check out the great content on Vanadian Avenue, and like and subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, all it leaves me to do now is to bid you a happy new year and a wonderfully weird 2023.